This video is all about how I treat two artists on the same song, two different singers on the same song. So my general theory for treating two singers on the same song is to use the same plugins across the board for both artists and also the same effects. However, the settings might be slightly different. So here is the chorus from the lead singer A420.
I can never understand. Little nigga just began. I got bitches on the gram. I don't do this just for fun.
And this is the verse section from Skyboy the rapper.
Touch the ceiling, baby girl, love your demeanor. I'm with my Catalina, can't see me like I'm Cena. We goes as a new Rolls Royce.
So they have quite different vocal tones. A420 is quite a pitchy, higher up sort of singer, and Skyboy the rapper has got quite a bassy voice. So there is some differences in the settings. As you can see, the EQ that I use there with Skyboy, I take a little bit more of that sort of boominess in his voice just to make him a little bit closer to what A420's sort of area that he sings in. And in terms of compression, they use the same compressors, the same saturators, but the singer has a slower attack and the rapper has a little bit of a faster attack. But in terms of plugins, they're pretty much exactly the same across the board. So in terms of effects, the lead singer here, A420, has a verse section here actually, and he uses this slap delay.
Get high, pass the double cup. I don't wanna stay down, bitch, I'm getting up. I can never step down, cause I got the crown in my tongue.
And Skyboy the rapper also shares the same slap delay.
Your demeanor, I'm with my Catalina, can't see me like I'm Cena. We goes as a new Rolls Royce. She knows I don't need.
And the settings for that slap delay are here. I use this Manny M delay. It's got a doubler on it, slight bit of distortion. It's got a little bit of reverb on it. It's got a high pass filter up to 300 Hz, low pass down to 14K, and the milliseconds are 28 and 28 on either side. There's a little bit of EQ on that as well, just taking away the low end up to 300 Hz. And in terms of delays, it's also the same story. So we'll come to the chorus here, and this 1/4 delay is automated for the end of A420's words here. So I'll let you listen to that.
Getting mad, but I never understand.
And Skyboy also has a little vocal that comes straight after that, and I also gave him the same delay so that it sounds like they're in the same space. So I'll play this. I'll play them both together actually. Oh, need to change this.
Understand.
Why these niggas getting mad? Yeah.
But I never understand.
Yeah. Why these niggas getting mad? Yeah.
So that just sort of puts them in the same space, the same area, as if they were in a room together, actually doing it at exactly the same time, even though they were recorded separately. So in terms of treating both artists, it's not too complicated. It's just a case of sharing the plugins, sharing the sort of vibe of each other, so they sound like they actually are meant to be on the same song. And that's pretty much it for this video. See you in the next.
In this video, I'm going to take a look at mixing and mastering. I'm going to go over some genre-specific techniques I like to use for mixing and mastering my own drum and bass tracks. These techniques aren't necessarily the way I would master other stuff, but for sort of club-based stuff, I quite like to use this process to get my tracks sort of loud and presentable to play in a club or at a party or whatever. So I've used this track for a preset breakdown video, but I have my sort of mastering chain set up on it, so I'm gonna just run it through from the breakdown, just as a reminder of how the track goes, and then I can kind of go over sort of my mixing and mastering process for my drum and bass tracks. Yeah, so that's how the track goes. So the way I like to mix and master for my drum and bass tracks is sort of tailored towards getting the track sounding loud, mainly just to play in a club. It all depends on the style of track I'm writing. If I'm making sort of a more kind of chilled, sort of liquid sound, sort of more like piano based, I probably wouldn't master it this way, you know, if I wasn't playing it in a club. But for this kind of style, I sort of focus more on getting the track loud but also sounding like clean, basically. So I've gone over my drum bus sort of processing chain and how I get my drums sounding loud, and it's sort of a similar process for everything else, but I'll just quickly go over what I like to do with drums. It's to basically overemphasize the transients and then limit it with a fast attack, but enough just to let the transients through. That way you don't really perceive it as like limited distortion, just because it's such a short moment of time that it's just the transients that are getting through. And that way you can get your drums a lot louder but sort of maintain the punch from the transients, and I think it suits it quite well for drum and bass. It's quite a good technique to use, in my opinion, just to get the track sounding loud. So yeah, that's sort of how I go about things, how I go about sort of getting my drums loud. And then the sort of main process I like to use is serial limiting. I like using this rather than trying to let one limiter on the master do all the work. I feel it's just a lot harder to sort of get things sounding loud without like sort of causing a sort of not pleasant sounding distortion caused by the limiter. So I have these buses here. These are my kind of mix and master buses. Basically what I have is different groups routed to different buses, and then they're all routed to the master. And the way I've got it set up, I have a bass bus which is has the sub, and the bass group is routed to the bass bus. I'll only usually create a bass bus if I have a separate sub. You know, in this case, I had this sort of mid-range bass melody, but I thought it would suit having a sort of static sub underneath it. So that's why I have these set up. I didn't want to run the sub through sort of the distortion and stuff I have on the group, so I separated it out and obviously done some processing to the sub and some processing to the bass group separately, and then routed them both to this bass bus. Now on the sub I've got duck, which I've gone over a bunch of times on why I like to use this. Basically it's like a volume envelope that you can be triggered by audio or MIDI. So in all my projects I have these sidechain triggers up the top here, which basically just trigger duck to basically sidechain for like this amount of time. And when it comes to sort of getting into the mixing stage, I'll actually go in and I'll delay the transients a little bit. Sort of, I don't know how many milliseconds that is, so yeah, some amount of milliseconds to the left of where the kick actually hits and the snare. It's kind of like a pre-delay for sidechaining. That way I feel that it sort of ducks a lot faster and it reacts better, and sort of, because drum and bass is such a sort of high-paced, sort of fast genre. I think this technique works a lot better for sidechaining. Sounds a lot cleaner because it'll just let sort of the transient of the drums through. So yeah, I like using duck because it's a lot cleaner than, like, say, using sidechain compression. I used to just do sort of volume automation, automate like the gain of a utility device for each kick, but the problem with that is that if I go to change like the pattern of the kick, I have to change the pattern of the sidechain as well. So duck's just a useful plugin that will just be triggered by these triggers at the top. So then I have an EQ, which is cutting off some of the upper harmonics, so it's only sort of letting through the fundamental and the third harmonic. I think because I have some soft clipping and a little bit of filter drive applied to this preset, so it basically creates some overtones I didn't really need, so I've just cut them off there. And then that's again limited with the Safe Bass preset, which is from the first version of Pro L. This is a preset I used to use all the time, so I've just loaded it up into the second instance, and that's basically just squashing the sub and making sure it's a steady level the whole time, especially because it's being amplitude modulated just very slightly. I just want to try and give it a bit of squeeze. And then the bass group is basically the mid bass. It's we've got a saturator, which is just kind of clipping everything, then an EQ, which is cut like a couple, I don't know how many frequencies above where the low cut on the sub is, just so there's not any phasing going on between the sub and the mid bass. And then I've got some mid-side EQing as well, and I've also cut everything above 10k just to sort of let the drums breathe a little more. And then that has also been limited as well. And then there's a sidechain to the snare drum as well, and there's not actually a sidechain to the kick because it is being high passed. And then this filter is obviously being automated in at certain points, which I think I went over in the preset breakdown video. So anyway, so both of those, the sub and the bass group, are routed to the bass bus, which then gets a little bit of limiting. It's just to kind of catch the peaks from that sort of plucked melody, which I feel if you catch those earlier on before going into your master limiter, it will just sort of, the master limiter won't have to work as hard. So then the bass bus is then routed to the vibes bus, which is actually just the bass and the drums. So they're the core elements of a drum and bass track, and they're the ones that I want to have like the loudest and the cleanest. So I limit those on a separate bus as well, and there's just a little bit of limiting going on here. That just kind of helps glue those elements together. And then the vibes bus then goes into the pre-master, and the pre-master is literally just everything in this one channel, and this gets a little bit of limiting as well. So in the case of using two limiters on the master, this is basically what this is doing. But the reason I have it on its own bus is if I want to do some different routing, maybe I have like a vocal or something that I want to just put straight to the master, or anything that needs to go straight to the master, I can do that and then have like a pre-master as well. So that's the kind of routing. That pre-master then goes into the master, where sort of the final sort of stages are done. I don't like to do too much sort of tonal changes or mix, like balance changes in here. Usually this is just mid-side EQ and the last limiter. Everything else I would go back into the mix and balance it in the mix, because I kind of do it all in one project rather than trying to get a mix sounding as good as I can, then bouncing out that file, then mastering that file, like sort of traditional way of mastering. I like to just do it within the project. It doesn't really, it isn't really like the best way to approach it, because, you know, like it's discussed a lot in college that mastering engineers, you know, they listen to audio, not music, and music producers listen to music, not audio, which kind of probably takes away from the fact I could probably get a better sounding master. But as I said, I like to only master my tunes if I want to play them out at a club, or if I wanted to listen to them in my car or something to check like the balance. If I was to have like a track scheduled for release or something like that, I would send it away to get mastered. I would just try and get the mix as good as I could, and then I would send that off. But in the case of mastering just for sort of my personal use, then I would just do it this way. So a couple of other things I wanted to go over was some of the tools I like to use when mixing and mastering and sound designing as well. So for mixing and mastering, I like to use this plugin, this Isotope Tonal Balance Control. This basically allows me to create a reference balance file from a track. So in this case I've chose a track by Data 3. It's a similar kind of vibe to this one, similar sort of style. So I've used that so I can now take a look at how that wave, sort of how the balance looks. That's just a good visual representation to use when mixing and mastering, because, you know, if there's any like crazy peaks, if the top end's too bright, or if there's too much sub or too little sub, I can just see it, and that way I can kind of just balance my track to a track that I play a lot in my DJ sets, or if I listen to a lot. It's just a good sort of representation to have, like just there for me to look at. And then the other one is span. Now I use span every day. Span sits on my second monitor. This is just another really good representation of just like what's going on. I can visually see what I'm hearing, and I can just kind of, it's nice to visually sort of fortify what I'm hearing. Sort of the decisions I'm making, I can sort of see what's going on as well as hear what's going on. So that sits on my master, and one of the things I like to use is the crest factor down here and the correlation meter. The correlation meter just basically tells me if things go out of phase. If stuff goes, if the meter goes all the way to the left, everything's completely out of phase. If it's to the right, I've got like a nice centered and mono bottom end. So you can see that's basically always along at the right, which basically means that my low end's nice and focused and in the center, and there's not any like phasing issues. And the crest factor, I don't really know how the crest factor works. I just know that having it around about 5 or 3 is good for drum and bass. It's just something that stuck in my head from watching a tutorial years ago. Yeah, something like that. And then the other tools I have on my master is this mid-side rack. Basically what I have is the key on my keyboard, number 1, is mapped to this on button of the mid, which basically solos the mid signal. and then number 2 is mapped to the side. So I can really quickly just listen to the sides if I need to, or listen to the mids if I need to. And that way that helps with sound designing as well, or definitely mixing and mastering. If I want to check my mix in mono, I can just quickly press a key and listen to it as I go. And then this last utility is basically a cool little technique I like to use on the sort of build-ups and breakdowns, is to just drop the stereo width. So I've got this 32 bar intro, then it goes into a breakdown, and then it drops. So what I've done is I've just sort of taken the width down so that when it drops, it sort of gives a sort of larger stereo effect. Okay, so that's basically sort of what I like to do when mastering and mixing. It's mainly just apply the processing that each individual sound needs. I'll apply the processing on the channel, and then I group everything like that correlate to each other. You know, the vibe bus is always sort of pads and just sort of different sort of melodic stuff, you know, like vocal swells and stuff like that. The bass groups, obviously the bass, I can either just have like our bass line with the sub in it, but in this case we've split the sub out, the sub's on a separate channel. Again, they get grouped together, processed in the group, sidechained in the group, then routed to the buses to get limited, and then obviously the drums is you know, each drum element's routed to the drum group, and that is routed to whatever bus I choose. And then the effects group is just sort of white noise, kind of fills and sweeps and stuff to help just kind of glue like sections together, sort of little sort of downfall stuff, and then, you know, white noise sort of riser stuff. So that is kind of my sort of my process of mixing and mastering. It's sort of the way I've approached it for the past couple years now, using this bussing technique. But as I said, I wouldn't use this for like anything other than sort of a club-based track that's you know, made to be played on big speakers, on a big sound system. If I was mixing like a, you know, on an orchestral piece, or even, you know, like a rock piece or something like that, I wouldn't use this sort of serial limiting technique. This is just sort of specific for my drum and bass tracks, just because I've sort of experimented with different techniques over the years, and this is one that I just feel works for me and allows me to sort of get my tracks loud enough but not completely squashed where there's totally no dynamics. So yeah, that was a sort of basic video of me covering mixing and mastering. I didn't really know how to go into further detail about this because, I mean, it's the same way each time. I didn't want to really do like a full track breakdown sort of showing each individual bit of processing I've applied to each channel, because it's usually just the basic stuff, you know, just EQing, compression if it needs it, you know, reverb and stuff dialed in on send effects. I thought I would rather go over this sort of concept of serial limiting and sort of the tools I like to use when I mix and master my tracks.
And I'm a bit self-conscious. Don't understand you.
Calling, then you stop calling. I'm not used to hearing the sound of silence. Your lips have been silent. I'm ready to hear it down. Calling, then you stop calling. I'm not used to hearing the sound.
Will you tell